Welcome to the Energy Seminar. My name is Debbie Senesky, and I'm very happy to host Charles Oppenheimer and Rebecca Tuhus-Dubrow here on campus today to have a conversation with us about scaling nuclear, bridging energy innovation, infrastructure, and public trust. It should be a very exciting dialogue today. Also want to thank the Precourt Institute and the Dorr School of Sustainability for supporting this event today. Rebecca is author of Atomic Dreams, The New Nuclear Evangelists, and the Fight for the Future of Energy. Charles Oppenheimer is the founder of the Oppenheimer Project and founder and CEO of startup Oppenheimer Energy. So the format of today is to have a dialogue, kind of a fireside chat, and then we'll open it up to the audience for Q&A, so get your questions ready. To kick us off, I will have Rebecca and Charles give us a few notes about their work and their life's mission. Rebecca, we'll kick it off with you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I am a journalist and author. I wrote a book that came out in April. As Debbie mentioned, it's about nuclear power, about the debate over it. And I came to it because I was very worried about climate change and had been for a very long time, and had assumed that renewables would be the answer, but started to hear more from scientists I respected in the 2010s that nuclear needed to be part of the solution. So I found that surprising because historically environmentalists had been the most opposed to nuclear, so that seemed counterintuitive. So that intrigued me, but it also seemed like an important question to explore. So that led me to writing the book, which focuses in particular on the story of Diablo Canyon, the last operational nuclear plant in California, because there's this half-century-long fight over it that continues, and so it's a great story. And my life's mission, I love that you asked about that, had to give that some thought. My first love is writing, so really my mission on some level is just to keep writing, but I see my role as not an advocate, but as exploring the complexities and nuances of a given issue and sort of trying to represent fairly a range of views and opinions, and hopefully in a way that's fun to read. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So I'm Charles Oppenheimer. As mentioned, I was founder of the Oppenheimer Project, which I'll point out. I got the idea in talking to the Department of Energy around 2016, was it, Lynn Orr? There's a graduate, a Stanford fellow here, Lynn Orr, who was actually a person who reached out to the family and asked permission to name a program at the Department of Energy called the Oppenheimer Science and Leadership Program. And we were really thankful that they asked permission, and it made me think at that time, why doesn't our family have our own representation of Robert Oppenheimer and his values and thoughts? And we don't have anything like that. Comes kind of from a family tradition of not going around and talking about Robert Oppenheimer and trying to affiliate with him. I grew up with that style, just you're on your own, figure out your own thing to do. And so I led my life being an entrepreneur. I've been in the software business in Silicon Valley about 25 years, eventually got into some tech investing, but nothing related to kind of the legacy around nuclear energy. And being inspired by Lynn to start kind of a nonprofit, but not really knowing what to do with it, trying to promote my grandfather's values and voice around science and how it could affect the world, especially the cooperation that's necessary around potentially dangerous science like nuclear energy to benefit the world. I was inspired with that, but I didn't really know what to do, and I had similar I had an ambivalence around nuclear energy. I had actually no opinion on it. In the family, I grew up with this idea that nuclear weapons are a threat to the world, and I should do something that could reduce the threat to the world in some way, but I didn't know how to do it. Nuclear energy, I really hadn't thought of. I just had vaguely negative perception with it that probably everybody absorbed through public media. And when I looked into it, I was wondering, it was a time in my life where I could step away from a tech career, and I thought maybe nuclear energy could kind of like solve the climate change issue instead of this like Band-Aid around the issue. It was just a thought. Could it? I don't know anything about it. And when I looked into it, I was really quite shocked at how far off my perceptions were around nuclear energy and nuclear power from the very provable reality that it's a safe and effective and a carbon-free form, and it needs help. People don't think it's safe, it's not widely deployed, and that really kind of radicalized me and turned me towards looking into promoting nuclear energy, both on a kind of a nonprofit advocacy sense, and then eventually I started a business, as I do always as an entrepreneur, Oppenheimer Energy, and its mission is to help deploy nuclear energy, not produce technology or a startup around it, but get to the deployment mode. Could we build new plants of any type that produces actual energy in the system? So we're focused on that thing. And life mission is nothing less than world peace. To solve nuclear war and climate change. I mean, it's a couple things.
All right, so we're going to kick off our conversation and begin starting with a very hot topic, nuclear energy in California. So as many of you know, California has long been a leader in clean energy innovation, as well as a state that is cautious about nuclear power. So I have the same question for both of you. We'll start with Charles. Diablo Canyon's pending extension in 5 years and new discussions about advanced nuclear reactors. How do you see California's role evolving and scaling nuclear? And what lessons from the state's policy, technology, or public engagement approach might inform the national conversation?
Yeah, so we're at a time in the perception of nuclear energy, which was vaguely negative and definitely prevented expansion of it over the last 40 or 50 years, where that's broadly shifted. The national trend is that nuclear power is now politically bipartisan issue. The last bills that passed on the federal level were almost unanimous in favor of it. Most of the shift is from the left side. I'd say roughly me, who didn't think about it, looked at it and said we absolutely need to have it. So the country has effectively decided that it's a good thing. And California is a bit of a laggard an extreme laggard on the old left who has not updated our policies. And so goes California. How goes California, so goes the world, is kind of an issue because California has not updated this broad acceptance generally in many places of the country to catch up on the policy level. Politically, many people in California, even popularly, is 50, or it might be lower than other states, but it's above standard where people approve of nuclear energy now. If you haven't been to Diablo Canyon, I would advise going there. It was the first nuclear power plant I went to. It's beautiful. It's on the coast. It's this incredible science that generates a ton of steam and powers this rumbling steam generator that produces 9% of California's power. You just sit there and it's a marvel of modern technology, and it spits out hot water into the cold ocean, and the dolphins are swimming and jumping. It's not a scary thing, but our policies have not caught up with it. In California, there's a moratorium on building new nuclear. There's kind of an old left pushback against Diablo Canyon that is still kind of working, even though percentage-wise it's teeny. And then there's this new advocate group that Rebecca can tell you about that most of the energy in the system is saying, hey, I'm young, I think I need this for my future, why aren't we doing it? And that's where the trend has been going. But business-wise, we're in trouble because I've been looking at different business opportunities. It's just not possible to do in California in terms of deploying nuclear energy.
Yeah, California, as you said, it was a pioneer, and I think it was maybe the first to place a moratorium on on new nuclear development in 1976, and a number of other states followed. And in the past few years, some of those states have lifted their moratoria, but California hasn't yet. I think there was an effort, there have been maybe a couple efforts in the state legislature to either lift it or carve out exemptions for small modular reactors, but that hasn't gotten too far. So yeah, I think there is a lot of interest, even among lawmakers, but it hasn't quite gotten to the point where they've changed the law.
Yeah. So as we think about the university setting, we definitely have to arrange an opportunity for students to visit Diablo Canyon. When we think about laboratory settings and scaling to larger energy systems, whether they be fission or fusion, and then again, keep in mind we're in Silicon Valley, how do we take our breakthroughs, again, from our labs here at the universities or national labs, and take them into deployable technology, again, translating them, but also maintaining national security? And we'll kick it off with Charles, and just to frame the question a little bit, your perspective, again, leading Oppenheimer Project and also your startup, Oppenheimer Energy. How do we keep up with the pace of scaling in terms of investment, recruitment, and overall momentum in the field?
Well, the national lab system evolved out of a single lab during a wartime effort at Los Alamos, and it's been a big leader in producing, the underlying science and research and funding for it. And the university system, of course, has produced, also produced the labs in the first place, right? It was the Berkeley established Los Alamos labs with my grandfather originally. So that's our tradition, which is this incredible basic science, understanding how the world works, has produced science that we can choose to use for any purpose. I've found myself supporting more basic science, especially around the fusion side through the SUN program. I approve of that. We need a lot more of that kind of unattributed, like, we're not doing science for just a business outcome, but we have to have the space to like truly explore our universe and the world. But when it comes to a business plan, I find the simplest, dumbest, safest path is probably a good path for us to expand nuclear energy. And so we have reactors that we know that we work. We know the problems with them is that the costs of those programs go over budget, poor construction productivity, and repeating projects and getting a scalable large system. The simplest thing to do is implement some stuff that we know how to do. So I think there's a mix. You need to do stuff that you know works and scales and is not breakthrough, and then you also want a certain amount of scientific investment and research. And one of the worst things I could think of doing is reducing our science investment and pulling out. And so I'm hopeful that turns around.
Yeah. And to Becca, what are the biggest barriers to that translation today, and what models of collaboration between academia, in particular places like Stanford, as we think about launching a center related to nuclear energy, and industry, government? How can we bridge this gap?
Yeah, well, one thing to note is that there has been a fair amount of progress in recent years in terms of government support. There's strong bipartisan support for nuclear now. And so starting in 2015 with something called the GAIN initiative that President Obama, it was an Obama executive order, and it was meant to help the national labs collaborate with startups. And then there have been a series of bipartisan lab laws that have also been intended to nurture advanced nuclear and help startups bridge the gap to commercialization. So I think that was, those laws have been important. But yeah, I think clearly pulling back on science funding is not a good way to go. And yeah, I think probably a lot of the funding cuts we've seen, they may end up being a barrier to that.
Mm-hmm. I guess just to add to that, because I love what you said about not cutting the science budgets. Mm-hmm. What can we specifically do as a community, as an ecosystem? Right, we're trying to build and really explore what we can build here at Stanford. What are some things that we can do together to convey that science is relevant here in the conversation we're having?
Well, I think we need some wins in the industry. There could be a criticism that there's a certain amount of basic research and scientific research, but in the U.S., we have not been as good at other countries as commercializing it and putting in systems in place that really get those systems up and running. And so we do need more. I don't know what part of that wouldn't probably be the top mandate for the SUN program, but in the system, we need more of that focus on deployment, and it's not well supported. It doesn't fit perfectly well with our capitalist system, right? You have funding for research, basic science, and then that you need to deploy it at really large scales, and that always tends to be the gap and the problem with this new science and new technology. So I think I've highlighted the problem and not given you a solution. So
sure.
Good luck with that.
That's good. Anything to add, Rebecca?
So how can you at Stanford kind of make the case for?
Yeah. Again, I think there was a comment around, funding science, and this is heavy on our minds here on campus today. What can we do as an ecosystem as we are building a community that aims to impact and scale nuclear? Is there anything that you think we can do now to help shape a successful ecosystem here?
Well, I think just having the conversations about it, and as we were talking with students earlier, just respectful dialogue, and talking to people who may not know much or may have preconceived notions or may not, and just kind of having those conversations. It sounds touchy-feely, but yeah, I don't know. In terms of actually affecting decisions about funding, science funding, I mean that was dating back to when your grandfather was working. That was a point of a very strong bipartisan consensus for so long. It seems to have broken down just recently, but so I think that is a bit beyond. I'm not sure how to beyond my.
I had one other thought is that nuclear energy really is popular now, both on the fusion and fission side. It's popular, so you're doing the right thing. You want to be in the space. California in general has been left behind, and if you look at Stanford, do you have a significant nuclear engineering program? No. So this is the start of it. You need to be in the conversation. So doing what you're doing of encouraging a new program, I think, is the right start. When the trends are going that way, it's not going to go away. It's something we need more of the world.
So building trust and policy pathways, we know that these are some of the current challenges. And Rebecca, as a journalist, how do we explore tough conversations but support one another? And what's driving the recent shift in cultural narrative, and how much does storytelling shape the political and financial realities of nuclear energy today?
So the narrative, I think there are a few key factors in why the narrative has started to shift. One may be the fading of these fears related to the bomb and weapons testing, and that were all wrapped up with fear of nuclear power, and there was this whole era of pop culture that made anything related to radiation seem extremely scary. And I think whether it's rational or not, some of those fears have faded over time. And at the same time, concerns about climate change have emerged and become much more salient. So it turned out that this sort of scary technology, nuclear energy, could actually be a solution to this new problem that emerged. So I do think there's a generational difference that I've observed anecdotally, at least, and that the younger generation tends to be more open to nuclear and less worried about it. And then, of course, there's the rise in energy demands that we've seen recently too. So yeah, in terms of storytelling, I think some of the advocates. In my book, I write about this small pro-nuclear movement that's emerged in the past decade or so, and we have at least one member in attendance here, Ryan, Ryan Pickering. And I think a lot of what they've been doing is trying to communicate in new ways, whether it's the world's first nuclear influencer, Isabel Bomecki, who some of you may have heard of. She's a Brazilian fashion model who decided to become a pro-nuclear advocate, and she made these TikTok videos where they start out as kind of makeup tutorials and pivot to science education about the virtues of nuclear energy.
We gotta check that.
So that's something new. That's not the kind of messaging about nuclear power that we saw in the past, obviously. So I think those stories and that kind of communication does have an influence, certainly on the politics. In terms of the financial realities, it can only get you so far. Influencing the politics and getting these laws passed that invest in nuclear, that can influence the financial picture, but only to a certain point. It is still it has been really expensive to build new plants, and so storytelling can only get you so far.
And Charles, what does an enabling policy environment for next generation look like, and how can startups and government work together to help shape that future? And what is your philosophy on bridging trust, and is there a sense of urgency?
Well, the policy environment has been favoring nuclear, I would say, out of the Department of Energy for a long time, or for the past 5 or 10 years, where there was a belief, if you talk to people in the Department of Energy who are not just lay people who are against nuclear energy, they looked at it and they said, we need it in our system, and they need to invest in it. And so there's been more policy drivers that support the deployment of nuclear energy, which include basic research out of the labs, GAIN programs, and then larger policy things like the Loan Program Office has $300 billion of loan backing to deploy to nuclear projects, and there's the investment tax credit that is very important in the financial world. Those are drivers that should make a nuclear project irresistible. Like if you're running a utility business, you should look at those and say, I have to invest in this, my risks are covered, I want to do it. And that has not been enough to really get any new nuclear built. It just didn't push it over the line yet. What has been working is startups pitching venture capitalists saying, I've got a new startup, it's going to fix nuclear problems, I want investment. That's been a very big growing category. And fusion is very popular on the investment and research side. So those are tailwinds, but it's my view that the really important thing is to get over to the reality, the real side of it. We have to be deploying it. We have to get costs of actual projects down by actually doing them and make improvements. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as just inventing new technology and improving the science, that hasn't been the primary blocker. It's more a practice that we need to do. And so I've taken my personal advocacy to talk to bankers and utility execs and try to create kind of models that if the real problem is financial and project risk, let's solve those problems instead of just saying that we can invent new technology. I don't know if that bridges all divides, but I've focused just on that area. I don't feel like I have to influence and sway everybody in the world about nuclear power being great, but just go to where the problem is, which the projects are not happening. They're right on the edge of happening. And so can we make those work and make it work at a larger system level? Or this kind of enthusiasm for nuclear energy may just fade away. There's been 2 or 3 of these renaissances where a bunch of people said, we're going to bring back nuclear power, and then they just don't get there. So that's the danger that we would have now, is not getting over the hump to real deployment.
Well, I have one more question for you both, and it's related to students and early career researchers, many of which we have here in the room today. So speaking to them, what skills, mindsets, areas of study will be most valuable in this emerging nuclear landscape? And how can young scholars position themselves to have real impact as the sector evolves? And what are the risks of entering this field? I'll start with Becca.
It's so hard to give career advice to anyone these days. Things are changing so rapidly, and there are so many uncertainties, not only in nuclear, but certainly including nuclear. But I would say, this may just reflect my biases, but I think being attuned to the kind of interdisciplinary aspects and the social science and sort of communication and not only the technical aspects will be important. And yeah, I think in terms of the risks, there's a bit of a catch-22 in the nuclear workforce. There's a gap. A lot of the workforce is aging, and not as many younger people have been coming into the field because we haven't been building plants for a long time. So that kind of discourages people from entering the field. But then that's also becoming a problem because there aren't enough people in the field, so it makes it harder to build and operate plants. So I think that is a risk, but you know, there is so much excitement about the field, and as I said, there are uncertainties in every area. So,
well, I found it a real breath of fresh air coming from 25 plus years of tech and software, which I love software. I grew up programming and I love the business of it. But to me, going into the energy space, it feels like we know without a shadow of a doubt that we're going to need massive amounts of energy 25 years from now. And it feels like such a safe bet, honestly. I hope I'm not steering you guys wrong. I went all in on it in my later stage, second career, and I feel comfortable with that, and like the knowledge that it's going to take a long time, 5, 10, 15, 25 years is an asset. And so if anybody in this room is studying the science and engineering, and you're working on fusion, but someday you end up working on a fission plant because you have an incredible engineering background. That's always happened in academia and studying, and you just do the best you can in your course of studies, but you don't have to make the perfect choice of like reactor design or even science type. That's an incredible starting point for getting into the field, and I think it's a safe bet. Well, I shouldn't say that safe, but it's a great bet that that there's going to be a huge expanded need, more than everybody in this room can provide. And I'll just point to one stat: the World Climate Association and the DOE and a bunch of governments a couple years ago called for the tripling of nuclear energy. And that was in addition to a massive growth in renewables. And they said there's no chance we can get to decarbonization by 2050 without tripling nuclear energy. That industry, if we got anywhere in the neighborhood of that by 2050, it's such a large industry that it would be great to sweep everybody along, and it's a huge growth field. And I keep doing the science and engineering, and there'll be a lot of places in the industry. There's a huge need for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for kicking off the conversation. We have about 17 minutes, so plenty of time for conversations and questions from the audience. We have mics here, and we'll start with you. We're going to pass around the mic. Stanford sweatshirt.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Scott Armstead, and I'm with a very large electrical subcontracting firm, and we do these hyperscaler projects, and the limiting thing is power, right, with this AI. So when you get right down to it, it's global competition. It's going to press us to get the power to run the data centers, to not be left behind, because so how do we speed it up and get it beyond the TikTok? I know that TikTok is very, trendy, but it's somehow it's going to bubble up sooner than later because of the demand. And I agree with your forecast for education. There's going to be a ton of work in this area in the future, because a lot of times for career advice, we just look out our window and say there's a lot of programmers. You should be programming. But when you get out and you get rise up the ranks, it's a different market. So thank you.
The demand from data centers and AI is real. Yeah. And the speed that they want the power at doesn't match well with nuclear deployment cycles. Like a standard nuclear project, actually a hopeful nuclear project might be 10 years. And that I'm talking about from planning to pre-planning and investment and then construction. And there's no known really shorter version of that. The Chinese are doing large construction projects like that down to about 5 years on the construction period, but they do a lot of pre-planning and stuff to get there so that it's really firing at all. So there's a mismatch there in how quickly AI and data center firms want the carbon-free 24/7 nuclear energy and how fast they can be deployed. But it's still a huge tailwind, because some of these projects you could say, well, we're going to do solar and some gas and stuff, and nuclear is going to come in 5 or 10 years. I find sometimes people would say, oh, let's not do it because it takes too long. Well, what's going to happen in 10 years? We're going to need more power then, and even more, and these plants built last forever. So I sympathize with a position where there's a lot of demand, and it's tough for the nuclear energy industry to meet it, but we got to try.
And you've seen in the past couple of years a few announcements to reopen shuttered plants, which was, I think, unprecedented. Mm-hmm. So there are two or three
of those. There's one half built.
And these are in partnership, at least one or two of them, with the tech giants.
Yeah, the tech companies have been driving all those deals. Yeah. Stanford sweatshirt, as we call you.
No problem. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. In parallel to nuclear, right, there are these other clean firm trends, like the falling, costs of enhanced geothermal or the falling costs of batteries. What role do you see nuclear playing in a world where both of those technologies are sort of cheap and ubiquitous?
There is definitely a role for all of the above, no matter what. There's no. You could argue that nuclear has proven its case. At least it's been built out in some countries, like France, 70%. U.S. it provides 20%. We all have hopes for geothermal, but it really hasn't proven that it can be deployed at wide scale. Solar and batteries are an important growing trend. I think the thing we know about nuclear is if you do commit and do it at a system level, it has an incredible payoff, and that's driven by the engineering and the power thing. If we don't commit to it and we just do it around the edges, currently it's pretty tough for it to compete. So that would be my question, whether we take our current level of commitment and really amp it up to the level that we know. It is expensive, it's complicated, but if you go all in on it like France does, you end up with a decarbonized grid that lasts 80 years and is cheaper and better than Germany's that went all in on renewables. So that's Yeah, that would be the rub.
Go ahead. I just wouldn't. I hesitate to predict anything, and I think solar and batteries, they have really plummeted in cost, and there are these advances in advanced geothermals or enhanced geothermal. So I think they may end up doing a lot, and we'll just have to see how it evolves. And at least my view is, not to get too attached to any particular energy source, and just see how things shake out.
In the front here.
Yeah. I used to work for Doosan. Doosan is a Korean conglomerate, and they develop small nuclear reactors and even containerized nuclear reactors. What you think is the chance to deploy massively this kind of technology?
Well, I like Doosan particularly for their reactor pressure vessels. So those are not small; they're giant, and the whole country of America cannot fabricate those. Doosan in Korea is almost one of the only companies that can do that and deliver them for large-scale AP1000. So the promise around small reactors has been something that's been marketed and sold very well. It hasn't been delivered yet, and so I think there's some hope for small modular reactors, but my starting premise is let's make sure we can do the ones that have already proven themselves and have proven better energy economics while we're doing these experiments with small reactors. Some of them have been going for like 20 years and haven't really gotten to the commercialization stage. I could go on that one for a long, long time. This is a fault line, unfortunately, in the nuclear industry, like small versus big, but I'm going to stop myself unless you want that. Somebody?
So, okay, I think that I agree very heavily that in the status quo, there's a huge problem in terms of science research not being funded, and part of that is the lack of communication to the general public about what science can actually do for individual people. We see this raise in popular support for nuclear happening right now, but how do we actually turn that popular support into momentum that causes nuclear projects to actually get built, further things to actually happen, especially because popular support isn't always correlated to either government action or public industry. What can we do? What can you do? What can people in power do? What do you think?
Well, I'd say build. Like, we need an actual win, because that popular support has resulted in the legislation, the potential government funding, the startups, the paper reactors, as we call them, the designs. They're all sitting there, but it's very tough for westernized economies to get that into construction and actually producing energy. And I think if we don't get over that hump, then we're in a problem. But what can people in this room do? You can join the kind of like advocacy side. I jumped in the advocacy side with what attributes I have, which happens to be being an Oppenheimer, so it didn't hurt. I was going to welcome in, but everybody has their own skill levels and things that they can contribute to. And so if you felt like really being involved in the nuclear industry is particularly welcoming to younger people, to talking to politicians, to making the business case for doing a startup or joining one, writing a book. Yeah. There's all kinds of...
We have a petition to the California legislature to correct its ridiculous anti-nuclear laws.
Moratorium.
We need you on the
Sign the
mic.
petition, see me afterward. And
Okay, I'll repeat that. There's a petition down in front to remove the moratorium, and the moratorium says effectively, if you haven't identified a federal storage place for nuclear waste or
federally approved method for processing fuel rods.
Thank you, sir. Cal, I like you.
Cal t-shirt.
You teed up my question too.
Yeah, nice. Hey, go on.
So my name's Eric. When I was 18, I was in the United States Navy. I'm a former Navy reactor operator. So the question I have is, it's teed up. What are the next steps that we can do to repeal the 1976 Warren-Elquist moratorium, or should we just build new facilities in other states? We see Project Pele in Idaho. We see Valor Energy in Utah. We see Tennessee. We see other states kicking it off. Should we try to change it? Do we use big tech to change it in California, or do we go elsewhere?
I think I would be pretty optimistic about the prospects of lifting the moratorium in California. I mean, I just think, and I mean the reversal on Diablo Canyon, I think, was one sign of increasing openness. And I've read comments from lawmakers and talked to lawmakers, state lawmakers, and I don't think there's at all like a monolithic anti-nuclear stance among California lawmakers now. So I think it might be just a matter of time.
I love, that's my one personal political cause. I haven't really done any politics in my life, and I feel like I'm a citizen of California. Yeah, I'm an advocate and do this kind of like international nuclear stuff and business stuff, but in California I feel like I'm a citizen and I think we should have nuclear power, and I want to go talk to the legislatures and do like grassroots stuff around removing the moratorium. And I think there's a couple like just tactical routes. One is it says you need to identify a federal storage place. We could say, well, we've identified that. Now let's build. That's like almost, just almost ignoring it. But not many people are in favor of that. The other one is we kind of looked into is a legislative approach where you get a bill in the California House with a sponsor versus a ballot initiative. And when I was talking to a guy named Jay Hansen from CFE, he gave me the best version of how you get a bill passed in California. It's not that complicated. Like, you go talk to a sponsor, you get a sponsor to write it, and it'd be nice if they wrote a good one instead of like a lot of them have been SMR focused. Like, big nuclear is bad, let's do SMRs. And I personally think that's not the right approach. It shouldn't dictate the technology choice. And it wouldn't be that hard to get a legislative sponsor. The people in this room could do it. When he was telling me about that, I was like, I could just drive up to Sacramento and talk to some people. And I think that's what it would take, honestly. It wouldn't be much harder than that.
That's how we protected Diablo Canyon.
It was just advocates that she described. Yeah.
We put together in our charitable organization to protect Diablo.
Yeah.
It can do it. Anybody can do it.
Yeah, it is a citizens thing. And we are following behind the other states. And so I've had to go to other states to look at opportunities to build because you just can't do it. It's hard enough to do any nuclear business, and California makes it impossible. That's a bad political thing. We should look up Gavin Newsom because he's got to do something before he heads out, and he would easily support this, trying to come to the center. There's our plan, people. Let's go talk to him.
So, thank you. Great talk, guys. So, Charles, you talked about build. The last plant was built in Georgia, $18 billion, cost overrun, 7 years delayed. How do we fix that?
Okay, well, so it was $18 billion misestimated. So that's one thing. The consensus for building another AP1000, which there's a huge growing consensus right now, financially and politically. I don't know if you guys have monitored this over the last week, like I have, nonstop. So there was a new $80 billion announcement of Brookfield and Westinghouse to build new AP1000s. And that is going to happen. It's like happening right now. I can tell you confidentially that the money and the projects are being pulled together to build new AP1000s. And the worst thing you could do if you were learning to ride a bike and you fall off it is to never get on it again, right? And we have to do that, and we should do it with that technology because it went over budget, and you can back out the design attributes that were not finished that contributed to the massive majority of that overrun, and say we can't do the first of a kind design. So that is a starting point that I think we should start with. But the problem is if we do 50 of those new projects, a lot of them are going to run into those first of a kind risks. So that's the harder thing. We shouldn't do 50 new ones. We should repeat one and then a few other ones to kind of get us to the point where we have cost certainty on new builds.
Hi.
Not that I'm opinionated on that, but
yeah. So back to the SMRs. There's a lot of companies that claim they would have working prototypes in the next 5 to 7 years. So this is quite confusing. Where do you think what's your position on their technical readiness or feasibility to on this timelines? I mean,
Has anybody read the Hyman Rickover report from 1954? Anybody? Maybe? Maybe new. It's great. It's a one-page one-page description of the difference between an academic or a paper reactor and a real reactor. And it's so fundamental that it's probably a principle or a first principle of nuclear engineering. And he says that when you're designing a reactor, it's cheap, it's small, it's beautiful, it's fast, it uses off-the-shelf components. He said this in 1954, and that is literally every single pitch of every reactor startup. And he says when you start building it, it becomes expensive, it becomes big, the corrosion problems are complicated, the operational capacity factor is the only thing that counts. Until you get a reactor built, they're hard. This is really tough science and engineering, and you prove that it works in the real world at real factors that make economic sense. You have a startup pitch, but you haven't actually solved the problem. So that is confusing. You summarized it. If you're a venture capitalist, you're designed to fall for that pitch. Somebody comes to you and says, nuclear power is hard, I've got a solution for a new startup, and you take the money, and it's created probably 120 reactor companies, and we're not going to get 120 successful reactors out of it. So I sound even more negative about it than I think. There's a place for startup founders and science and stuff, and some of them will work, but it's very hard. It's much harder than it seems to get these things into commercial operation.
Thank you very much for spending time with us this afternoon. You both shared great insights into how policy can help or hinder the scaling of nuclear. I'm wondering what insights you have on the opportunities to refine U.S. policy by collaborating with international governments, maybe a best practice exchange with governments who are already solving similar issues.
I think you might be the one to take this one.
I feel like I'm talking too much. But yes, I love this area.
I mean, I think there are opportunities for sure, and I think, or I hope there are. It's hard to say in this sort of turbulent geopolitical moments, but I think this is a lot of what the Oppenheimer Project is working on.
So I do love that question because it was my kind of grandfather's original premise on what you do with nuclear science. And he, coming out of World War II, it was 1946, and he was working for Truman on the recommendation. And they said, well, the only path of dealing with this is to recognize that you can't keep some other country from having it. We have to cooperate, particularly on fissionable material. And I think that is still the heart and the first principle of nuclear science. It can't be owned and kept away from other people. There's no effective defense against it. And the increase in cooperation is our only path. And that's not just talking about the weapons side, it's also the energy side. And so that, I think, is the reality of our world, whereas politicians and frameworks of military industrialization find it profitable to kind of like have conflict and arms races. It's not, facts have a way of inserting themselves. So we have some hopes to increase the cooperation, particularly between the three hardest parties, US, China, and Russia. Those are the ones who need to be talking about the potential for weapons threats and the benefit that we could have through increased international cooperation. But that's a really tough thing. You think building a power plant's hard. Come over to the Oppenheimer Project and work on something really hard, because that's tough. We partnered with the IAEA. So there is international frameworks, there's a non-proliferation treaty, there's global governments, but it's funny that it sounds harder and more impossible than like making fusion work, because everybody knows, well, humans are not going to get along and we're just going to fight, but you just have to like take a certain amount of hope to it and try, even though it's difficult.
Great. We have time for one last question.
I guess just kind of comment too, just kind of close it out a little bit. When I was in high school, I did my AP history project on your grandfather and Manhattan Project, so this is like awesome. And then during the pandemic, I spent just ad nauseum amounts of time reading Department of Energy documents for Atomic Energy Commission. So we have like 70 years of tech. After World War II and into the 50s, our national laboratory complexes pivoted to advanced nuclear research development. Building all kinds of things, prototypes that were never tested. We had an entire maritime gas-cooled reactor program. NS Savannah came under Eisenhower, Atoms for Peace, and all this. It floated under the Golden Gate in 1960, going to the Seattle World's Fair. It was on a pressurized water reactor because they got the contract. We didn't even use any of the high temperature gas reactors that were developed under that maritime gas cooled reactor program. And this is awesome that Stephen Chu's in the room. It's awesome. And so, you know, it's just, I think full circle. We want to, October 18th, Army released the press release on program Janus that's going to deploy the technology that's going to be tested at Idaho under Project Pele like next summer. So we have advanced reactors moving. There's a lot of momentum, I think. This is awesome comments from everybody, and we'll see what's next. I don't know that I have a question.
All right, any response to the comment?
There's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, you pointed to history and common trends. You want to wrap this up for us, Rebecca?
Oh, thank you.
Although they want to support the applicant in California, changing the law in California, that they can contact me if they want.
What's your name, sir?
What's your name?
So, here I'll give my email away. God knows what's going to happen. CANNARA at sbcglobal.net.
Canara?
It was originally IBM.net, but God knows what happened over the years. At any rate, Canara at sbcglobal.net, and I can put you in touch with the people, the charitable organization that's doing the work of protecting the applicant and our future in California, I hope, for nuclear.
What's your first name?
Alex.
First name, Alex. Yeah, yes.
Do you want to give a comment about that? Because you're mic'd up.
Yeah, no, just if someone asked me to give a concluding comment,
yeah,
I think I would just. I mean, it's great to meet students earlier and to see you all here and to see all the excitement about learning more about nuclear and wherever you stand on it. And so I'm just so pleased to have this conversation and to see all of you here. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's give a round of applause for our guests.